So I've been talking about dry seeded wheat, and as after saying, we sort of, as scientists, we always seem to be behind 2-3 steps behind the farmers. They've been farmers of dry seeding now, not just lupins and canola, but they're heading into territory of wheat, and they've been doing it for a few years, and they've been doing it quite well. We're jumping the bandwagon now. We're working with people like Plant Farm. The talk yesterday was saying some of the better farmers, 34% of their program are now dry seeded, compared to the average farmers around 24%. It's an area where I think farmers are going into it on their own accord, and I think it's about time the scientists try to catch up. So that's the focus. This is going to be a bit of a data dump for you today. We started doing some pre-emergent work last year with some funding we got. So today is just presenting 1 year data set on just starting to look at which pre-emergents are actually working well for us under dry seeding. I'd like to initially acknowledge our funders, the National Adaptation and Mitigation Initiative, or NAMI, and there's a few NAMI reps in here. I think Emma is in the audience, I think, and we've been working with them over the last 12 months on climate change research program. And it's also, NAMI is funded by DAPWA, GRDC, and the Australian Government's Climate Change Research Program. The reason why we looked at dry seeding as an adaptation tool for climate change is more because farmers sort of get turned off by climate change, but they're managing seasonal variability. And what we're finding, what we're observing is more summer rainfall occurring, and we're seeing less winter rainfall. And that's last 10-15 years we've sort of been observing that, and that's what the climate change models are predicting. So how farmers are using dry seeding as a climate change tool, they're not thinking about climate change, they're thinking about the seasonal conditions they've been dealt with. So that's the reason why there's such a large adaptation to dry seeding, is trying to make use of every drop of rainfall that's been fallen, particularly over the summer months. The project's also been funded by REDIC, the Rules Industry Research Development Corporation. These guys funded an overall dry seeding and stubble retention project we've worked on the last 12 months. We've looked at Roundup Ready, technology and stubble retention, trying to get herbicides working in high stubble loads. I won't be presenting that data today, but if you're interested, come see me afterwards. I'll also be presenting some data that's not in your paper. So anybody wants a copy of this talk or some raw data, again, come see me afterwards and we can arrange for you to get the data set. Okay, not another trifluralin trial. I've been talking about trifluralin since 1995, and I can't remember crop updates where we haven't talked about trifluralin. I'm still amazed that it's still working for us. In South Australia, up to 80-90% of their paddocks are now trifluralin resistant. They've been using it for a lot longer than we have, mainly because they had white weed problems. But trifluralin is still working for us particularly well, and I think the reason why people saw Pete's talk last time talking about harvest weed seed management, farmers are managing group A and B and phenoxy resistance and diclofenac resistance by using IWM. And we know IWM can actually increase the longevity of herbicides. So I think that's one of the main reasons trifluralin is still maintained in this environment, is that the farmers are using IWM. And the same with glyphosate resistance. We use glyphosate as a first attack, if you like, for weed management. We don't use it as the last line of defence. And where farmers around Australia are using it as a last line of defence, they're getting resistance. So fallows, fence lines and so on, we're getting glyphosate resistance. We haven't got it yet, and I think that's the reason why we've got most farmers in WA are practising good IWM. So no-tillage farming has allowed for early seeding or seeding for convenience. Farmers seed for a date these days. They tend to not look at the weather conditions as much. They've got a large program, they want to get it in, but they also know they can get yield advantages by getting in early and wait for the early rainfall. And I'll demonstrate some of that during this talk. The timeliness of operation, I think maximising water use is the main reason why people are adopting it. It comes with risks, and we're negotiating with GRDC at the moment a project looking at dry seeding to examine these risks. But one of the most obvious ones is weed management. We haven't got a knockdown herbicide to use in a situation of dry seeding. So I'm looking particularly in this talk about dry seedings, pre-emergent herbicides, And we had going to concentrate on 3 trials. The Cunardon trial with using hand and seed disruptors in your books. The trials with the Cunardon and Wickman groups are not in your books. Again, come to me and I can give you that data. The design. We had hand and seed disruptor at our main site in Cunardon in 2010 harvest. We decided to opportunistically, while they did their side-by-side treatments looking at our windrow burn, we asked Mike to, can we just do 3 strips please, so we can have a bit of a look-see with dry seeding in 2011. So they came through and harvested three strips here of HSD, and then they also harvested 3 strips without the HSD for us, so we can have a separate trial. And then we came across in probably mid-April, it was totally dry conditions, and we sowed trifluolin, secure and box gold in a strip design. It's a non-replicated design, but we can actually analyse this. This fallow was our car park for our field day. I won't be showing that analysis in this talk, but there wasn't very many significant results. Before we get going on the results, I want to talk about the HSD. We had 90 mils of rainfall on this site in 2010. The ryegrass was about that tall. A lot of it had shattered. So when we came with the HSD, when we come to the results in 2011, we only got about 10% control using HSD under those situations. And I think my Hamilton always says the techniques are only as good as how much you can get into the header. So in this particular year, the drought year, we harvested late, a lot of shattering, very short annual ryegrass. The HSD didn't work, now windrow wouldn't have worked, chaff cuts wouldn't have worked particularly well. And the results showed non-specific effects on HSD, so I won't be talking about the HSD results from this point on. Just a caveat to that, 2011 will be a sensational year to do a weed seed catch. Wet year, ryegrass, nice and green at harvest time, setting up. You would have caught a lot of ryegrass this year, or last harvest. Okay, some of the results. This is annual ryegrass control in plant numbers. So this is percentage of untreated control for dry seeding. Trifluolin under dry seeding conditions didn't work. This soil type was medium soil type, and what happened when we sowed, it just turned over clods of soil. We did not get an incorporation of the dry seeding conditions, and the performance of trifluolin was pretty poor. You compared that, box of gold was reasonably good under dry seeding without a knockdown, all these without a knockdown, and secure was by far the best herbicide under the dry seeding conditions in this trial. When we delayed seeded, the effect of just having a knockdown with no pre-emergence, we got a good response there for weed control. And the other herbicides were fairly similar, they all worked in a similar amount. But by far the best treatment was secure. But that's probably highlighted more when we talk about biomass. This is annual ryegrass biomass. The trifluolin now, just talking about ryegrass biomass, is almost down to 0% control. So we had slight reduction in numbers. The biomass of the ryegrass was down to 0. And the dry seeding treatments performed quite well. And there's a big crop competition effect here, where the plants come out of the ground 2 or 3 weeks before these guys emerge. They're a lot larger plants, they've germinated under warm conditions, and they've got away fast. So we look at the crop biomass here, you see that these 2 treatments, box gold and secure, we've had reasonable weed control. They've germinated early in the warm conditions, and we've got much bigger biomass than we have with the delayed seeding, which is something we'd expect. Where we had fairly poor weed control with trifluolin, we didn't get that biomass, so the competition from the weeds has taken over the benefit from early seeding. The all-important crop yield. Overall, we had talk about statistics. When we talk about statistics, in this trial, I'm not 95% certain that we got a yield effect from going early seeding, but I'm 90% sure. A lot of the stats, I think, when we use particularly weed science trials, the variation in the field, I think we can quite easily justify a 90% confidence level compared to 95%. Particularly when you get results like the box of gold and particularly the secure. There's a good tonne a hectare yield difference in this trial, and we had mild frost in this paddock as well, which didn't really affect us too much, but we had a tonne a hectare where we had good weed control and early seeding. We had got a great response. Of the delayed seeding, yeah, the box and secure were about level pegging, but we still had a tonne of hectare difference. Okay, the other two trials we just didn't focus on box and secure. There's a whole heap of other options out there for pre-emergence, and I won't go through them all. If you want the data set here and the doses, please come see me afterwards. I can give you a complete data set of all the doses we used. But this is just a trial in Wickerpin on a sandier soil type. And the bars here, about here, are all the dry sowing, and these are all the delayed sowing with the knockdown. And you draw a line with the average here. We certainly got a much better response to weed control when we delayed seeded using a knockdown and with a whole range of pre-emergent herbicides. Whereas the dry sowing, a lot poorer weed control level. Of the ones, again, secure is probably the best of the dry seeded ones. I'll come back to Boxer, but just keep a note that Boxer didn't appear to be particularly good. In our Cunardon trial, the previous trial we just shown, the Boxer Gold treatment was probably the best treatment we had in the first 2 weeks after emergence. Clean as a whistle, and secure was still a bit dirty. But come 6 weeks later, and secure with the cleanest whistle and Boxer run out of puff. And we see that quite a bit, those two herbicides combined. So with secure, under these conditions in dry sowing, in this particular conditions, for some reason didn't perform as well as we would normally expect Boxer. So I'll come back to that a little bit later. The general rule of thumb there, ryegrass control, much better control with the delayed seeding. Go to panicle counts. This is just the guesstimation of how much ryegrass is going to be set seed for the following year. And it shows probably a similar story in that delayed seeding all had knockdown, all had reasonable similar control for ryegrass, set seed and ryegrass. You average that out, it's fairly poor control. However, there's some treatments here like triflurin, Avidex and Dual Gold, and again Secure here, which had a very good effect, almost as good effect as delayed seeding with the knockdown. So if you get your pre-emergence working well, there's no reason why you can't go early without a knockdown. I'll talk about these issues a little bit later, but generally speaking, provided you can get the pre-emergence working, you don't necessarily get a huge penalty. But if you get it wrong, you do get a huge penalty. If we look at wheat yield, go back to this Boxer Gold treatment. It had a very poor response to any ryegrass control, but we've got a good yield response. It's averaging around in the other ones. It's probably a little bit down on, say, Secura. But the Boxer Gold, despite having poor ryegrass control, what we observed, actually obviously it must have had some effect very early on. So for this particular trial, we did get a yield response. Secura, again, we've got it right, early weed control, we've got a massive yield benefit. And overall, even with these treatments which didn't perform as well for ryegrass control, out-yielded the delayed seeding in this situation. So we've got a good tonne of hectare yield benefit when we've got everything right, everything perfect. Go to Corrigan. This is a gravelly sand. The early seeding, the dry seeding here was marginally moist. It wasn't quite perfect dry seeding. And this is the area where dry seeding gets a bit dodgy. You speak to Doug Arbeck and the company, what we're most worried about, we're quite happy seeding into perfect dry soil, but when we're seeding into marginal moisture, you're not quite sure how the germination is going to go, how the herbicides are going to interact with the soil, will they last, will they hang around, and so on. So this was marginal moisture conditions. And once again, similar story. I've gone straight to panicle production here. I've bypassed the plant numbers. Where we've delayed a dry zone, we've got overall generally a poor weed control level compared to where we've used a knockdown. Again, the Secure in here has done probably the best again of the herbicide choices. But again, what's a good thing about this trial, I think, is we've got a whole range of pre-emergence there that's still working. We've got all these 2- and 3-way mixes that, may not quite as good as Secure or Boxer Gold on a good day, but they're all working pretty well. There's this 3-way mix here that's probably the best weed control we've had. Triflurin, Dion and Metribuzin, all performing particularly well. So the resistance story for pre-emergence, I think we've got a long life there. We've got many, many years where if we run out of Secure and Boxer. And anyone see the talk yesterday by Roberto Busey? They've evolved Secure resistance in 3 years in the lab. They couldn't get target site resistance in Secure. They sprayed over 100 million seeds with Secure. They couldn't find target site resistance, but they found metabolic resistance in 3 generations. Now that's set up a bit biased because the way they've done the trials in the glasshouse, they've got a population of ryegrass that's resistant to almost everything, and they chuck Secure at it and they force crossing with it. In the field, anything resistant will cross with it susceptible. There's a seed bank there. There's integrated weed management going on. So that's absolute worst case scenario. But just a word of warning: Secure is a medium to low risk herbicide for resistance. But if you're using low doses, if you're not looking after it, not using IWM, it's just another herbicide. You will get resistance. And the scary thing was when they got resistance to Secure, we got cross resistance to Boxer Gold. So the mutation or the genes that incurred the metabolic resistance in Secure also inferred resistance to Boxer Gold. And that to me is probably a scarier thing than actually getting resistance to Secure. But we've got all these other options that's still working for us. And when we talk about resistance for mixes, we've got 2 and 3-way mixes. A lot of the scientists saying 2-way mixes are no good for resistance management unless they're full dose, full application. That's because you end up just sort of selecting for resistance to both herbicides. But I think these 3-way mixes, from a resistance point of view, as long as 2 of the 3 in that mix is enough to kill the ryegrass plant, you're not worried about the 3rd one getting resistant, so it'll kill the 3rd option. So I think if we're talking about resistance management of mixes, the 3-way, I'm much more happy looking at 3-way mixes than I am with mixes. 3-way mixes compared to the 2-way mixes. Particularly most of these mixes too. The mixes you get now these days, there's always one component is sublethal. Even like the Boxer Gold, the metallic oil component of that is a sublethal dose, and it's probably not the best for resistance management. Okay, just I've got a bit waylaid there, but we'll go to the crop yield in the cohesion trial. Again, dry seeded yield response. So we've got poor weed management, but we've got a yield response. And where we dry sown, better weed management, but we've got a yield penalty. Again, we didn't get any frost in these trials. Where this might all switch around, if we did get a frost event that attacked the flowering stage where these dyes emerged compared to these dyes, and that's something we'll have to work on, hopefully, with the new GRDC project over the next few years. So key messages. We've definitely got a yield advantage when sowing early. In all our trials from last year, we did sacrifice some weed control, and we did put a heavy reliance on pre-emergence. It still concerns me we are putting a reliance on pre-emergence. Massive resistance risk by doing that. However, I think, as I mentioned at the beginning of the talk, as long as we're doing harvest weed seed set management or going back into pasture or whatever you want to do for IWM, I'm not so concerned about that. As long as you're doing that, I'm not so concerned about putting pressure on your pre-emergence. If you're not putting in IWM, then dry seeding, relying on pre-emergence is an absolute recipe for disaster. And the harvest weed seed management, it's a fantastic tool. You've got to pick your years, and you've got a drought year. You've certainly got to get in there early and try and pick up as much ryegrass as possible. And with that, I'll finish there for questions. Thanks.
I was just wondering with Secure then, if growers are using that, is it okay to use it as a standalone then, and then when you go back in following seasons with the 2 or 3-way mixes or whatever, is that what you'd recommend?
As Steve Powers would say, any diversity is good. But there's another school of thought that says maybe long-term strategy is best to hammer one to death and go move to the next one. So there's 2, in the modelling work, there's 2 schools of thought there. My gut feeling is as much diversity as you can, it's going to help. That strategy will not avoid getting resistance to Secure, it will just delay it. So you'll delay it. As many, it's numbers games, number of times you use Secure. But you're certainly mixing it up and maybe saving your Secure for your wheat and using your trifluorins and other chemicals for your lupin and canola, your TTs and so on. It's a good strategy. But as I say, it's just delaying if you want to avoid resistance, you've got to do something that year. So if you double knock a strategy, whether it's, it can be anything that year, it can be a crop topping, it can be a seed catching. So to avoid resistance, you've really got to do something within that same year. You can't let those survivors set seed.
I was just going to ask you about the Cumberland site, the triflua and the pretty poor result. I was wondering if it was cloudy soil or poor incorporation. Was there a reason, do you think?
Yeah, no, it was a heavier soil type there, and when we preserved it the day after, and when we sowed it, it just turned clods over. So just didn't get incorporation. That's why triflua failed. The other site's for sandia. It's a gravity sand in the sand, and the incorporation was good, and that's the only reason why it failed. Triflua can work under dry conditions, but it needs that incorporation.
Were you getting a knockdown on all of your delayed sowing ones, or some of them just sown immediately on the rain without a knockdown?
No, we waited 2 weeks after the break of the season, basically, so there was a good 2-week gap between the emergence of the dry seed and the emergence of the...
You talk a lot about ryegrass, and everybody seems very fixated on it. I reckon the real elephant in the room is radish. It's 100 times worse than ryegrass. The metribuzin that you're using in your 3 ways, was that giving you any activity on the radish?
I didn't have any radish in those trials. I wouldn't have thought the doses we're using would be marginal, I would have thought. But you're right, I think ryegrass, we do a lot of work in ryegrass and radish, and I was thinking about before the talk, and we're really concerned about there's a whole heap of other weed species out there that we've done no work with integrated weed management. And once I think we can manage ryegrass reasonably easy. Radish is harder. There's a whole heap of other weeds, particularly our summer weeds, coming in and invading into our winter seeding program that are bloody hard to kill. I think they're the ones we should be talking about investment. GRDC, we're looking at the biology of some of these other weed species and trying to come up with other integrated weed management strategies.